warning before you listen. This epic is not for children, nor for the faint of heart. We retell the ancient Greek myths as they were born, unfiltered, unsoftened. Scenes of violence, curses, betrayals, and a hunger for power that shows no mercy. Given the many conflicting versions of the Titan War, the events have been rebuilt to complete the missing pieces. Here, we tell the myth as it was meant to be told. Sources and references are listed in the episode description. Chapter 65. From the Titan War. Clash of weapons and the fall of time. Gaia's heart. When silence speaks. The journey toward the drop that changes everything. They raised their heads, but the old man had vanished. Only his words remained, like the last hammer blow echoing through their chests. They could have turned back. They could have fled. They could have told themselves it was all just myth. But they didn't. They stood still, as if the earth itself was holding her breath, waiting for their answer. Then they saw it. A faint scorch mark carved into the stone, as if an ember had walked there 1,000 years ago and left behind a trail that no mouth could name. Brontes stepped forward first. He reached out, and the stone burned his skin. But the pain didn't stop him. It made him smile, like someone who had finally found the road he was meant to bleed on. Stirapes followed, dragging with him a storm of fury that had been waiting to erupt. And Argus? He didn't hesitate. He descended with a whisper. If this weapon is never born, then let everything else in me die. They followed the ember trail, not because they had to walk, but because something inside them had chosen to never return. When they reached a fissure, where the rocks exhaled smoke too old to see, Brontes said, though his lips did not move, "We never asked for this path, but we were made to carve it." And so they descended, led not by their feet, but by their hearts. It wasn't a path, it was a wound, as if the earth had reopened an ancient gash and decided to swallow those who didn't know how to scream. No torches, no maps, only a hatred burning in their bones since the day their brother was slaughtered in a square that knew no justice. Every step peeled a year off their skin. Every rock whispered back the agony of unheard voices. The air didn't relieve, it strangled. The light wasn't fading, it was being exiled. And the deeper they went, the more it felt like time itself was vomiting a piece of history no one wanted to remember. They saw faces etched into the walls, in dried blood, not the faces of gods, but of those who had screamed as the first weapon was forged. They heard the murmurs of mothers, whose children were never born. They saw the long shadow of a sickle, moving without a body. But still, they did not stop. At the end of the tunnel, at what some call the edge of the pulse, the three stood before a stone bleeding a green vapor, a mist with no scent, but anyone who inhaled it would forget who they were. They knelt, not in surrender, but as if the earth had forced them to shrink, to squeeze into a crack unfit for those who survived. Then the rocks trembled, but not on the outside, inside their chests. Something cracked, and they saw themselves, not as others saw them, but as they had never dared look. Children running through temples, men trying to forge weapons from grief, brothers who couldn't cry, but knew the flavor of ash. And then the voice came. It wasn't a voice, it was a quake, as if the old world had decided to speak for the first time. And she appeared. Gaia, no body, no face, just a mass of pulsating earth, a green fracture that had no end. She spoke, her voice like a question that refuses to be answered. "You come seeking the drop? the one that sliced through time, the one that is never given but judged? Steropes answered, his breath exhaling sparks. We did not come to ask, we came to pay. She replied, And what makes you think you have a price? Argus spoke then, his voice dripping like an open wound. Because we've suffered, and our brother died, while we still breathe. The ground began to change. The light was no longer fire. It was a screen too ancient to name. A wind rose, not cold, not stirring dust, but freezing hearts in place, and then the drop emerged. It wasn't liquid, and it wasn't flame. It was a living thing, its pulse not heard by the ear, but felt in the bone. It circled them, smelled them, then entered, but not their bodies, their souls. It embedded itself in their chests, like a question that can never be spoken, and then an echo carved itself into their bones. What you take is not a gift. It is a debt, and all who bear this secret will either burn or become fire. From that moment forward, iron feared being struck, and their hands were no longer the hands of makers, but of a verdict not yet spoken. This chapter of the epic has come to an end, but remember, what you've just heard is not a record of facts, but the echo of a myth, a story born from the imagination of the ancients, etched into the long memory of humankind. If this tale stirred something in you, if it opened a door to reflection or wonder, don't forget to support the channel and share the journey with those you love. And in the comments, tell us which moment in this chapter struck you the most and why. We'll meet again in the next chapter of this audio odyssey through time. Until then, farewell.